Well, I thought Les might be able to make it today. He's good at designing these things, but I had some spare time this afternoon. It looks like it's going to rain any minute, so I wanted to, I made up a little diagram of how I want to make this rack for the attic to put the bombers in and to put all the planes that we're not using every day. Again, we've reorganized the shop because of the increased workload, and we're coming up on a building season where we're going to be building a minimum of 2 planes at one time. So I wanted to, and believe me, I started cutting this with a hacksaw the last time we made this. Forget it, I took out the chop saw, I quit fooling around. By the time I was done hacksawing up 100 pieces, it was unbelievable. Now we even have this, I gotta put this back up. I just took it down to get some idea if I could use some of this material, because we got a lot of these fittings, but the material is almost unimportant. It's so cheap. All of these PVC things are so cheap, and when you buy them, buy a bag of fittings, not individual ones, because you can bring them back with ones you don't use. They're cheap enough. I made up a little test piece just to see where this would stand. And I thought, well, what I did, I forgot to take into account the B-25 fuselage being 4.5 inches wide. So good thing I didn't glue any of this together. I'm just going to cut another piece. And I also need to take into account the Tiger Cat rudder is 20 inches high, if you measure from the ground. So I'm going to make one of the pieces 24, just to give it a little extra clearance, and the rest of them 20. I just don't want them getting close to each other if possible. And then we'll just fill out whatever's left with the top with normal size, traditional size planes. Now, a lot of times when I'm doing stuff like this, there's what I call the hit and miss method. Is I got to make a test part. In this case, this was it. I know I need about 1 inch more clearance. So, and then I'll go in and check it, because I have to account for the fact the foam is going to go around this so it doesn't ding up the paint. Now, in this case, I like these models to be on the day I die to be perfect, if possible, or as good as I can get them. So let's make this, add 1 inch, get rid of that piece now. And there's another trick to doing this, is try to get this centered. Get them both the same. We got to put one on the bottom too. And by laying all this out, I've like stacked the deck in my favor here. Now, when I used to do on the house renovations, doing all this PVC work, I learned right away, forget the hacksaw. Okay, now we have a good chance. This is going to be our test piece now. We got a spare. And once I'm happy with this, see, this has to fit, pretend this is the fuselage, this has to fit around the fuselage. And then I have T-fittings for all the screws that are going to hold the model. So I'm going to check this, I'm going to go upstairs and check this, cut the rest of the pipe, then go down on a workbench and glue it all together with PVC glue. Now the next step, after we made this little, I guess we'll call it a rack for lack of a better word, some PVC cement. And the nice thing about this is if you don't like it, you can just, say for instance you want to move that bar, you can just cut the fittings, and a hacksaw, of course, you can do it by hand. But we can make this infinitely adjustable for bigger and smaller planes. And when I measured this out, and I didn't realize this in the beginning, I'm going to have to reorganize all the furniture in a room, because see, I used to store the planes up on a wall here, and it just got too cumbersome and dangerous. And when there's 4 or 5 people in a shop and 2 different planes, and what I wanted to have is a place to put stuff on the floor that I could look at it from a top view while I'm working on it, and especially because we're going to be doing this bent wing Stuka very soon. So this rack is going to really serve us a good purpose, and when we're done we can just, a couple of wood screws, take it off the wall, or however we're going to put it up there. I still haven't figured out, Karen isn't happy with the way I have the furniture arranged in my mind, but I guess Enzo isn't happy either until we get this, get it up and take a look at it when we're done today. Now one of the little things, I thought this would be a good tip to put on a tape. When you're using this glue, and you use the purple primer, and I use rubber gloves because this glue really is gooey. But one of the little tricks that I found is, and actually the time Les and I built the other rack, we found this out the hard way, is get the glue on there, and when you start pushing these fittings in, it seems like they go in all the way, and you let go of it, and it kind of slides out, and I don't know why. Maybe because the glue puts a compression on it. But holding them in place for the time that the glue is drying is a good investment. Now the reason this is kind of important is because if each one of these legs opens up 1/4 of an inch, the rack will start to tip one way or another, or the arms, and of course the arms you want to be all parallel. You don't want them all rickety and rickshaw. And another thing I thought, well, I forgot to glue one of these in on one of the racks I had. I thought, oh, that's pretty strong. I just pushed it in. Yeah, that'll never come out. And what happens in time, it just starts bending down. The glue actually, it really is a necessity to get that glue in there. But anyway, just some little tips that when you're making up one of these racks, it looks like it's a simple thing, and it is. But you really have to take some precautions to make sure all those joints knit real good and prime it with the purple primer. None of this stuff is expensive. This whole rack probably cost about $30 or something. And what's handy is, I know you can make, Kent Teiser's made racks like this for his minivan, places to store the planes. There's just, at some point in time, now we have about 10 or 15 planes at any given time in the garage, the house, the cellar, the attic, and rotating them and storing them is almost like, well, it gets to be an issue, and it's an issue because we don't really want to have any damage to them. The main thing is to store them in a way that they don't fall or get stepped on, or when Karen's up there going through her closet, she doesn't wind up using a Tiger Cat for a laundry line or something. Anyway, good little tips. And the next step, once this glue dries, I'm going to let it dry for a little while, have a cup of coffee, and I'm going to start rearranging the furniture up there. Now, once all the glue is dried, I wiped the whole PVC, the part of it that we're going to see. See, the part where the wings are going to rest, that part's going to be covered with insulation foam. But the part that we're going to see, I took a can of Rust-Oleum chrome paint just to make it a little bit neater looking, because I didn't want to see PVC pipe with all that writing on it in the room. This is kind of like our little pride and joy room here. Now, in the years that we were flying our twins, especially the B-25 with the Z-Tron, we needed a place to work on it, and this is just perfect. Again, $20–$30 worth of PVC pipe, some foam insulation. See, one of the pieces got busted off. In fact, this thing has really been used a lot, because I was using this even as when I was assembling it in the shop. It was very difficult to work on it. You can imagine with the twin rudders, you can't just flip it upside down. So having this, and again, these little things, I know Frank McMillan's got a great little one that he can use, like when he wants to burp his engine or change the pipe length or something, he can just flip it over. It's kind of nice. These things are very easy to change. They make a great, and I don't have one in a Windstar. I have clothesline poles, or shower curtain poles, I should say, but so I can get 2 planes in there. But these are very, very handy, very easy to make. Again, the tricks are when you're gluing these together, just make sure you push and hold until that glue sets, because that glue, a lot of times will just start separating, and then one side is bigger than the other. And in this case, I cleaned this all down with something, lacquer thinners or whatever, but I never painted it because this was a functional thing. But the other thing we hope is going to work out pretty good. But one of the things I need to do is reorganizing that furniture is going to be a major job. I just know it. I'm not deluding myself thinking this is going to be like a half-hour job. If you're an old video subscriber, you remember when Mike put these closet doors in. Just reminds me now, he bought this door, very expensive door, because it was all one piece. He wanted it all pre-framed, and we couldn't get it up the stairs, so we had to cut it in half and assemble it when we got it here. Shows you how smart we are. Anyway, this is the soft pipe foam that's good. It fits right over the little legs. Now, what I learned a lesson from Joe Adamusco. It's always good to have the rack lean just a little bit, just for safety's sake. So if there's an earthquake or something, the planes don't go brrr and fall off. To have them leaning a little bit forward, always helpful. And then I just put one set screw in there, just to kind of hold it in position while I measure, because I'm fighting for space and I don't want to waste even 1 inch. I want to get that I'm just in this corner as closely. Otherwise, and I know I'm going to have to move the couch, but this gets to be like musical chairs. But what this is really going to do is give us the storage space, hopefully nice display space for 3 airplanes when we're done. And then we can play musical chairs. I'm not sure if I want to put the Spitfires there or put the bombers on the ceiling or what I want to do yet. That's yet to be proven. But this pipe insulation goes right over, and then I'll put whatever scraps are left over right where the wing actually connects there. Now, because we're fighting for every inch of space here, I moved this 3 or 4 times already to try to get this as close to the wall as possible, because I still want a little bit of an angle on there, and I still want the planes to be, the Tiger Cat especially needs a giant amount because it's got that 20-inch rudder. But the next challenge is going to be to get all this furniture kind of moved around and to the point where, well, and I don't know that it's even going to work, but we're still going to find out. And we're even getting to use the rack here as I get the plane set up. And it looked like our little the little cabinet worked out well against the wall here, and I was afraid that wouldn't work well. That seemed to work okay. Tiger Cat fits real nice, and we still have full use of the bed. It's working out better than I thought it would. Well, this was the better part of a day, and to be honest, it's one of the jobs I had put off for so long, and I'm not sure why. Just a day that you really need to just take a day and suck it up and do it. And in this case, this was one of the things I wanted to get done, and I wanted to have that rack finished, and I wanted to have the furniture moved around. And it looks like, well, maybe this is going to be better than I ever thought it would be. And boy, whenever I look at this model and I think this was the beginning of pretty much 4 years of working on twins, flying twins. Really learned a lot, really enjoyed every minute. There's not 1 minute at whenever I play a video or a DVD of these guys flying, especially at the Nats, especially that footage that Bruce Hunt shot of the Tiger Cat. That's some of my favorite to watch over and over again. And I think back with the Joe Adamusco with the Seafires and Spitfires, and getting inspired by Keith Trostle's sliding canopy, and among other things, the carrier hook. All of the DVDs and videos, and of course, probably my favorite, and I don't know why I baby this so much. This is the original Spitfire with the old Big Jim Tiger 60. Got 3rd place at the Nats, won the concourse. Actually, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 concourse awards. Half of the concourse awards I won are now in this room. And this, of course, the Seafire, the only one that I know of. It's the only plane I know of, period, that's ever won 2. And got a 20-point award. So I guess we got a lot to be happy for. And the way this worked out, and the reason I say this is a lot of people like me, I guess. It's the same old thing. Put it off till tomorrow, put it off till tomorrow, mañana. And then all of a sudden one day you realize it's tomorrow. And the way that rack worked out, I think that's just near perfect. And whenever somebody visits us, and we're due to have some visitors from California very soon, Warren Walker is supposed to be driving to the East Coast in his motorhome and supposed to spend some time with us. And boy, old Miss Ashley, now a test plane, but still a good one. Al's Millie. And I think now they've got some pretty good company here. Boy, that looks nice in silhouette. That's pretty cool. Anyway, it's a long day, and we're going to get back to the shop tomorrow. This has just been one thing. I am really impressed that I got this done. Willpower. Now today, with our Spitfire bedroom just about complete, except for a couple more little things we want to do up there, we thought we're going to have a great flying weekend, but this storm is coming through here, up from Florida, and it's already getting really, really crappy out there. So I thought today'd be a good day. Number one, I wanted to make a spinner cone, a test part out of the mold that Midgley made, and I wanted to go through a step-by-step how to prep up a brand new aluminum mold. Now in this shop, and I've organized it pretty well as I can, and I guess you've seen that, but here's what I've done that I thought was significant. Is I laid all my fiberglass cloths, and there are plenty of them, all different, even from this, but you probably could make a Titanic out of. So I have a lot of choices of material here, including carbon and carbon e-glass combined. And I thought I'd mention something. Now a lot of people, maybe the new subscribers, don't remember making molds. We made molds of everything you possibly could make. Scoops, wheel pants. We still have wheel pant shells here. Strega cowls is the one Billy Hummel made. We got Spitfire cowls. Spinners. We've got just about everything in the world you could imagine here. But here was the point, you know, and here we were making carbon fiber bell cranks at one time. Here's the whole point. Look at this, there's one from the old bell crank mount. I save all these for a reason. I like to, before I'm going to work on a new part, I like to look back, get some, I don't know, some memories of things that I've done that, guess what, there's another box of molds. Actually, there's a 5-bladed prop that never even got dressed off. It's been molded but not dressed off. But anyway, we remember the old, and there's hundreds of these floating around. Hundreds of bell crank molds, but here's the whole point. The whole point. In fact, here's the rejects. This is the bag of rejects that had molding flaws in them. We originally had the one Joe Adamusco made, the original cowl for the I-beamer. Actually, that's something I may be using again pretty soon. If we get a chance to work on that plane over the winter. The Griffin molds. But here's what I wanted to make a point. Now that everything's so nice and organized, let me make a little bit of a valid point. Now, as people that have subscribed for a long time and you know, have watched all the carbon fiber stuff evolve, it's an evolving process. You didn't start by making a Tiger Cat fuselage. Now in the future, I want to make even more molded parts. Molded parts really offer a lot of advantages. You can replicate them. In this case, we have the belly pan mold for this plane. If somebody were going to make a Testarossa, we could make them a belly pan, among other things. But this spinner mold, this is one that Dave had envisioned maybe even going into production and selling these, but I got the parts from him when I was up there in Hampton, and it's about time I laid up a test part. Now, a test part is always a little different than a final production part. Now, this is the original mold that Dave made. And this is what he did. He gave one of the spinners that no longer in production, he gave it to his friend at the machine shop, and they made a perfect CNC copy of it in a block of aluminum. The bottom piece comes off for convenience sake so that we could pull the bottom off when it's done and pop the part out. Sometimes you can just pull it out depending on how much draft angle you have. And here's the neat thing, is I didn't go to school to learn this stuff. I did this the hard way. You know, I just kept breaking parts and wasting resin and putting wrong materials together. But over the course of, and this is going to be 11 years that we've been molding parts, we've kind of learned our own little system and hopefully passed it on to other modeling people. Well, the first step on an aluminum mold, there's a very important step, and that is to get 4 coats of high temperature wax roughly an hour apart before we put PVA on this mold. Now imagine, if we put epoxy on here, it's going to stick. We need to wax this thoroughly. Now in the course of learning this the hard way, I found out there's the wrong wax, the right wax, the best wax, and there is one wax that works, and what makes it work so well is you have to do it exactly the way they suggest. And when you do it that way, the part pops right out. When you don't do it or you take shortcuts, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, because we want to have a long life on the mold, I want to polish this and wax it and really take my time doing it, not do it and run off and have a cup of coffee. But the trick has always been, that I found works the best, and I've done it several different ways, is to put 1 coat of wax on, wait an hour, buff it off, put another coat, wait an hour, buff it off, put another coat, put it on, another coat. they recommend on a new mold, a brand new mold, 4 coats of wax. And I thought in the very beginning of doing molding parts, wow, if you just leave a little wax on, no. You got to get all of the wax off. You want the wax only down in the little valleys, the little molecular valleys. You don't want any wax, no extra wax. It should be like wax in a car, that you could see yourself in there when you're done. So that's going to be the first step on this. And I want to go through it step by step. So when somebody, if we decide to sell these and we sell them to people, they don't wind up saying, oh, that was easy, oh, you just make that in 2 minutes. When we were making other parts, I remember people saying, well, I can make that in 10 minutes. Yeah, you can make it in 10 minutes once you have the mold. A mold like this is a minimum several $100s. You also need the rubber plug, which is going to be the compression part of this. Then I need to test with several different kinds of materials to see which material is going to be the ultimate one we're going to produce parts with. So there'll be a lot of interesting little steps, but the first one is always to get the mold prepped. Now after trying, and I mean a lot of different waxes, some I got from George Spar, some I bought over the counter, for sure, absolutely for sure, this is the wax that I prefer, and I use this on all the mandrels, the landing gear mold, the tune pipe molds, and of course on parts like this. This works extremely well on aluminum. The other thing that it works real well is it's relatively easy. Let me just show how easy this is to use. Of course we've used a lot of it, so again, this is a working shop. This is not a shop like we just sit down here and try to make fancy stuff that doesn't work. This is like a Ferrari shop, where at the end you got to have a Ferrari. Now I like to wax the whole mold. The reason is some of the wax, the resin always drips on it. So if you get a coat, get it down there, the wax really has to dry a little bit. It isn't like Pledge where you just wipe it right off. Especially on the molds that we use to mold up the carbon fiber tanks. Those molds really have been, we've made hundreds of them, and pretty much everybody on the East Coast here has one of those tanks in their planes, and so we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work in the process of making them. Now the place where this is going to be a problem, as always, is in the little corners and edges, to get those little corners nice and crisp. So this is why we're going to try several different materials on our test part. Now I'm just putting this coat of wax on. I'm going to do this 4 times, 1 hour apart. And what's going to happen is, now this has to dry. Once it dries, then I take microfibers. And you can get these in any car parts. So these work good for everything from cleaning eyeglasses to cleaning your car to absolutely, yesterday when I was working upstairs, I cleaned all the Spitfires off with this. Cleaned Al Raby's plane off, cleaned Millie. You can use this with no wax, or you can wax and then use this to buff. Microfibers. So anyway, now this is going to be 4 steps here. So I'm just going to let this sit. Nice thing about any silicone mold, you don't need any release agent. Just that spray release agent after about 30 pulls. So we won't even put any release agent on this until we have about 30 pulls. But right now, this has got to sit an hour. Then we'll repeat this step 4 times. And on the 4th time, then we'll be ready to put the PVA on there. And you would think, and there is a class you can go to at Smooth On in Pennsylvania, and it's like $300 for a Saturday, that they teach you how to do this. Or you can be like me and take 10 years and figure it out yourself. Or you can buy Windy Videos, that's all. I just wanted to mention one other thing here as we do the multiple coats. A new mold, especially a new aluminum mold, is called a green mold. Now a green mold means that all the little molecules haven't been smoothed out yet. So it's on this first waxing that we actually really have to put the time in. Now when I started learning this, a man named Ed Gallagher gave me a lot of good tips and interesting tips. He had worked for Bob Violet, and he said this is the one part of it that most people get wrong. They don't polish the mold enough, and that he would take, in his case, they're doing a big jet fuselage mold, and they would sit and polish the mold for hours on end, just like you buff out a plane. But then in the end, every part that comes out of there should have that nice smooth finish, and plus you don't lose parts. Now, I remember Paul Winter building some kind of big composite fuselage mold, and he asked me how to do the wax and releases. Oh, that's a lot of work. 4 coats of wax, 1 is enough. Who needs this? Who needs that? And he outsmarted himself because the part is still in the mold as we speak. He never did get it out. And a lot of times what happens with composite molds, what you wind up doing is destroying a mold when you have what's called a catastrophic lockup. So, believe me, over the course of the last 12 years, I've learned most of this, or even all of it, old school. I haven't really ever taken any class on anything. I don't know why I'm proud of that. This would have been a lot easier just to go to school and learn this in one weekend. Or if there was a Windy selling videos 96, 95 and 96, I could have bought the videos and maybe learned this a lot quicker, but it's all in the eye of the beholder anyway. But I can't emphasize enough, and I have ruined molds myself. Even a couple of the wheel pant molds I kind of skimped on. And one of the things I tried to do, I tried to use a Dremel tool to polish this, and no good. The best way to do this is with microfibers and do it by hand. And it doesn't have to look shiny, it just has to be shiny. Because we're releasing a part, and every time you smooth it, there's less surface area when you want to pull the part out. So we'll give that, as soon as we're done with the 4th coat, this will be ready to PVA. Okay, now with all the wax dried and polished, so I wanted to show the label here. This is the material that we use. It's called PVA, polyvinyl alcohol. This forms a release agent so that the part doesn't stick to the waxed aluminum. Now there's several ways to put this on. The easiest, if you're going to do big parts or multiple parts in a day, you put it in an old spray gun and spray it at 90 psi. Problem is, cleaning this out of the gun is a labor-intensive thing, and a lot of times if you don't clean it, you got to take the whole gun apart and soak it and boil it and everything. So I've learned very quickly that unless I'm going to do a lot of parts, just brush it on. And a lot of times it doesn't look. Here's another thing too, is anytime you do this, anytime you use PVA, always strain it. And I keep the old things because you can see all the little dots. Those are, I don't know if you can see them, the little pieces of like solid PVA that come out, and you don't want that in the part. So anyway, what I decided to do here, because this is a test part anyway, it's not going to be a production part, you take a nice clean brush, and all you have to do is brush on. Sometimes 2 coats are enough, sometimes 3. It isn't a fancy thing. Now if you see, when you, and this is a critical part of this, if you happen to see if I can show this. Let me try with the backlight. If you can see little fish eyes in the PVA, it means you haven't wiped all of the wax off. You haven't really done a thorough job of wax. So you want to get what amounts, when it's all done and dried, it wants to look like a piece of saran wrap that's the shape of what you want. I also, because I don't want it to stick up here, I want to see here a good example. Here's where I haven't buffed it off enough. See up here where it's just fisheye, and I don't know if you can see that. Let's try it with the... You can see how it's kind of fisheyeing? Well, what happens now, if you rub this off, a lot of times, and you do it when you spray in a big mold, you see a big fisheye in the middle, you got to wipe the whole mold. Now we got little tiny fish eyes. That means we still don't have it all off. But a lot of times, if you do this, in fact I'll do it with microfibers here. Prepping the mold is 90% of getting a nice part out. The actual molding, if you had 2 guys, one was prepping molds and one was loading them and pulling parts out, it's the guy that preps the mold that's the high skill level guy. Okay, that looks a lot better. That looks like we've got a good chance of getting this part out now. So once this dries, and what I'm going to do is to dry this, I'm going to hang it upside down so that we don't wind up with a big glob down in the bottom there. I'm going to put 4 little things here and let the PVA pull its way out that way. See, a lot of times getting a successful little mold is just, I made the landing gear mold for the Spitfire, and I never realized the bubbles go to the top. So I had the part upside down. I thought, oh boy, that's great. I took it out, all the air bubbles were up against the part, and I had to sand them all out. Kind of, well, a lesson you learn the hard way. Now, they tell you 2 or 3 coats of PVA. If you spray it, sometime you need more. what you need is a sheet. This dries to a sheet of PVA, and then you know you have it. And it's green so you can see if you've missed a spot. Critical, getting the PVA on nice, and once that PVA dries about an hour or so in this temperature, we'll be ready to, in the meantime, I'll cut up the material and get ready to lay up a part. Again, it's a test part, but still would like to have a nice part. Okay, by letting the PVA dry, any drips that'll come out, hopefully will come out this way. Now, again, if we're going to have a problem brushing it, well, maybe we'll set up the airbrush or something to spray it. But again, when you spray this, if you do, there's two problems. Cleaning the gun is one of them. And a lot of times you got to spray with, they tell you 80 or 90 pounds, and there's a lot of waste involved. So if we can get away with this, maybe we need a little bit bigger brush, I'm not sure. But again, this is just a test part. And because, you know, this is why I find it so challenging, is because if I went to school and learned how to do this in 1 or 2 afternoons, you know, it just wouldn't be as satisfying to me as when I pull a part out of the mold and it looks real nice. I'm real happy with that feeling. I like working on experimental stuff. And if I had you know, another life to live, maybe I'd enjoy being a NASA engineer or something, I don't know. But then I'd have to go to school, and that'd be a deal breaker. Now, while our PVA is drying, I wanted to get some idea of what shape. I got to make a pattern. Now, the idea of using e-glass for a test part is it's cheap if we're going to be throwing parts away, and we may. Also, e-glass conforms a lot easier than carbon, even though that's not an issue in the final part. But I thought I'd try to do this in at least 2 or 3 parts. And I do have some 4-ounce carbon I can use once I get a test part made. We also have a choice of resins. We can use West resin, and we can use Tune pipe resin. We really do have a lot of choices. But here's the part. And a good way to start a pattern is just try to get this shape. Now, if I do this 4 times, I think I'll have what amounts to be little double areas up here too, like little ribs. Or I can use 3. I could make this, probably 3 would be enough. As I'm working with this shape, I'm trying to come up with, because I'm going to make a cardboard pattern to cut the material, I'm also going to need some little nose rings a little bigger than normal, so that I can build up, because this area is where the bolt is, the nose cone is going to press against. I need a little reinforcement in there. Okay, now we have several choices of resin here, but for a test part, we just keep it as simple as possible. West Systems resin is about the easiest to use of any of the resins, and I just want to pull a part out of this mold that I can see how it's going to work. Okay, another trick, get all of the resin mixed before you mix the resin. This gives you the most amount of work time. Get all the material cut to shape. We have a little spinner reinforcement in the front, and I made a couple extra pieces in case I'm not happy with them. Now, as always, most important thing with any resin, you think it's mixed. When you think it's mixed, and everybody thinks it's, oh, I gotta rush, you have about 45 minutes of work time with West Systems, even with the fast hardener, because it's cold in the shop. I keep the air conditioner on to keep humidity down. So that gives us a little bit of an edge. And we're not going to pull a part out for a day or so we don't really care. Now, once the resin is thoroughly mixed, and this is the key part, we have an angle down at the back here, right at the end, where it's going to have a tendency to pull up. And if I don't get something down in that corner, what's going to happen is I'm going to have a bubble there that I have to fill with Aeropoxy Light or some other material. So I'm going to try to avoid that one way. I'm going to take some Cabasil, and this is just one of many filler materials. I can take a little bit of it out. It's like talcum powder. It's very, very light. And I'll take even a little more than I need. And you can get that the same place you buy the West resin. Any place that sells boat supplies is going to sell West resin. And get the pumps. Real easy to use if you're new to molding. Everybody I know that's gotten, including Midgley of course, who's gotten the West Systems resin thing working, they love working with it. It's a very easy thing. Now, somewhere down the road, we may want to make these spinners out of a structural resin like Epon, or a high temperature resin like the Tune pipe resin, the George Spar resin, or something different than what we have. But in the meantime, having a test part is going to tell me a lot. Now you mix this up until it's the consistency of peanut butter. And the way you define filler coats in the world of resin is they're either mayonnaise, and mayonnaise drips off the brush, or if they're thicker than that and they don't drip off the brush, let me just give an example. They're referred to as peanut butter. That's a peanut butter mix. That's a thixotropic mix. Now what I try to do is find the midpoint where it just wants to, just drool off the brush if I hold it long enough. And I just put one more drop on here. And this is a little bit like mixing concrete. If you've ever done your own concrete work, and thanks to George Venturini, I'm a real, I wouldn't say I know what I'm doing, but we've mixed a lot of concrete. And there you go. Now it's just getting ready to drip off the brush, but it's not dripping. That's what I want in that corner, down in that corner. Now I also, because I'm going to try to make the equivalent of a gel coat finish, whatever's left of this, I can add a little bit more material to and just paint the mold. And this will be like a poor man's gel coat. It'll just give me a little bit of a surface. Now if we were making these out of where we want to see the carbon fiber black, I want to paint them, but if I want to see the carbon fiber black, it'd be a little more intense. I'd have to get some clear gel coat to get that clear finish, or once they're dry I'd have to spray urethane paint on them to get a clear finish. Either way would be fine, of course. But there's a lot of different ways to make this stuff, at least in our world of modeling, where we're not in production. I don't have a production like I need to make 10 an hour or something. But now I need to get, and I'll do it with the brush, the little piece that goes up in the tip, and I need to position it. So I'm just putting a tiny bit of resin on. I want that to be right in the tip. I want that to define all my corners. Get it pressed in the corner as best I can. In fact, I'm going to use two because it's a test part. And again, the cloth does not add any appreciable amount of weight. It's the resin that adds the weight. So a lot of people, they think by using, lightweight cloth and a lot of resin, it doesn't really work that way. You really want to have, and they refer to it in molding as the mix being, because it's called composite, the weight of the carbon or e-glass and the weight of the resin. When it's 50-50, the same weight resin, the same weight cloth, you have a pretty good part. That's a pretty high-tech part when you can do that. So in a part this light, it's only going to be a gram or two even if we're off. But now I'm putting in, and again I got to decide if I'm going to do this in 2 parts, 3 parts, 4 parts, or how many parts. You need to get that piece in, and it'll stick now because I have resin up on the shell. It'll actually stick pretty good. Now I'd like to do this at some future time, maybe with 2 pieces. But again, I just want to see a test part here. Now as soon as I get a piece in, I want to take a look, just paint in just enough resin to make it wet. The idea is not to get a bunch of it drooling and drooping and globbing up, just enough to saturate the material. Another trick is to get the resin to come up over the edge, because you'll always have a dry edge here for whatever reason. Especially when I was doing nobler cowls all the time, you'd always get the edges to be that it would suck the resin up off the edge, and I don't know why that was, but I don't need to know. I just need to know how to get around it. And once I have this, the minimum amount of resin on this part, and that's the real key here, is not to have any more resin involved in this than I need. Let me see if I can do this with a wide one. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this the way I dreamed, but it never hurts to try. No, that ain't happening. What I need is more of a point. I got to remember to change the pattern. It's too big down in the point and not big enough up top. But again, I'll be adjusting the pattern, especially when we start to make these out of carbon fiber. I don't want to be wasting carbon fiber, of course. When you're dealing with $90 a yard material, you just don't want to be throwing anything away. Okay, now I need the pointiest one. Well, let me get a little more resin on this. But the neat thing about molding is it's challenging. And back in the 90s, I think there was a time, I might be wrong, when almost nobody was using molded parts, and we've gotten to the point now, pretty much most of the props on the modern engines are carbon fiber of some kind. And I was glad to see Doran's little business succeed. He's got some nice stuff coming out of the molds. Again, let's look at trying to do this with a thin piece here. And now that we have a lathe, that changes everything, because this winter coming up we're going to be making some stuff that we really could never make before, even including tooling. The trick is to get an overlap, but not have it overlap by an inch or so. We can get that up around there, I think will be fine. And then if we do get a spot that's bad, we'll try to put the prop cutout right there. Okay, so this will be a test piece. I'm just going to paint a little more resin on this. Again, it's down in that very point that I don't want it to be weak. Paint a little bit up around the edge, because that's going to define the edge where we're going to have to cut this. Try to get away as much of this as we can. That is also another way we could be doing this, that we could be putting in some bleeder cloth and some cotton to pull out any of the extra resin, but on a part this small I don't think it's really worth it unless we had some scraps we were trying to use up. And I think we're ultimately going to be able to make these parts out of 2-ounce carbon when I get familiar with the way the mold handles. But I found it challenging, I found it interesting, and again, the hardest part was back in the 90s. Everybody said, nah, you can't do that, nah, that's no good, nobody's going to ever use carbon fiber this or that or whatever. And now, needless to say, you're almost everybody is. But that's been the story pretty much of my whole life. Always being told you can't do something, and then somewhere down the road. Now, here's what I'm going to do. As just to build a little edge up along here, because I really want to have a defined edge. And then I'm going to put this aside to dry. Now, if this were a sunny day, or if I lived in California or something, put this out in the sun. The sun bakes the resin probably in an hour. You could pull the part out, but we're not in a rush. I got a lot of other stuff to work on the shop here. We're still catching up from our wonderful vacation, and I'm still hoping, in fact I think I'm going to just, for a test part, I'm just going to let that sit and come back to this tomorrow and see what we can pull out of the mold. Plus I got another interesting project I'd like to work on today. Now ultimately these are the parts that we're going to be, it's the long ones that we have this mold for, but of course we can just make a mold for these also. But we wanted to have the mold for these. And again, if you could just buy these in a store or from some reliable source, everything would be different. But believe me, try to buy one. They advertise them, but you never get them. That's the problem. So I'm putting some weight on that rubber part. Next thing, and as always, I've got enough to make one more prototype. But another thing right away, pour the green PVA back into the jar, because it will evaporate. Before you know it, it'll be gone. In an hour, that'll be evaporated. It's very, in warm weather especially. And clean the brush, soap and water, and dry it with a hairdryer. And that's why you can use the same brush for several cycles. You can see we have, it looks like we're going to have enough resin left over out of this mix, and I hate to throw things away. Grow up poor and you'll find a way to save everything. So I have my real old, and this mold is getting really to the point where it needs to be replaced, but I can make a little set of exhaust stacks with the resin that's left over. So really nothing goes to waste. And here's a mold, just talk about something worth having. Here's a mold that hundreds of parts have been made out of, and these things are, everybody that's got these on their plane, I bet I've sold 200 or 300 of these. And imagine every time you'd have to cut up the tubing and try, oh man, try to make these. This is one of the parts that when you make a Mustang or a Spitfire, you think, oh, I'll just make that. Oh yeah, the tubing or spaghetti or something, or macaroni. And when you're done, you're crazy because it's difficult. And I remember making up the original plug, and I looked in a drawer where I was organizing things. There's the original plug. So you can see this mold is even getting pretty chewed up and rough and everything. Doesn't matter. We have the plug, and I can just recreate this mold with molding rubber. So the nice thing about making a mold is always save the plug, make the mold. When a mold wears out, just recreate the mold. And usually the thing with rubber molds, 30 pulls without release agent. As soon as you get release agent, about the 30th pull, it'll start pulling the little chunks out. Start using a smooth on release agent, and you get maybe 100, 200 more, and then it really, even with the release agent, it starts chunking up pieces of rubber, and then you recreate the mold. Now I put some release agent on there. The trick with this mold is, any mold where you're going to anticipate air bubbles, is you pour the mold, and again, this is the scrap resin that's left over from making a spinner, and I can almost tell how heavy that part is going to be by how much resin I've used. This is a 1 ounce mix. That part is probably going to be way under, between 1/4 and 1/2 ounce when it's done, and it's got a finish on it. And I've made them, when I made the Spitfire ones, I had them down to about 4 grams, the cones. You could carefully make a cone at 4 grams. Now the trick is, now this is going to start releasing air coming up to the surface. Air bubbles come up to the surface. So before I put the little reinforcement on there, and in fact I gotta go get some. And you can use, I'll use a piece of this for lack of a piece of material. Anything can work here. This just reinforces it, that when you hollow it all out, you can use up scraps of carbon, scraps of glass, e-glass, it doesn't even matter. And everybody that's ever tried to make one of these little exhaust manifolds, boy oh boy, looks so easy when it's done. Or if you go to a Mustang book and you say, yeah, I'm going to make those exhaust manifolds, yeah. And boy, the Unrich Jacobone's plane, he hollowed, now you have to hollow them out with a Dremel tool, so I made him a whole bunch of rejects to practice. So if anybody's really wanting to have a set of these and have them hollowed out to where they're paper thin like a scale would be, well, the trick is, tell me and I'll send you some rejects so you can practice with. But here's one that's already done. This one's got a couple of flaws, but it doesn't matter, because these are parts you're going to fill in. When you get a little molding flaw, you just fill it in with Air Epoxy Light, Bondo, anything. Now as we're getting ready to start the building season, and that's coming up very soon. In fact, with these storms going through here, maybe start it today, I don't know. But we got a lot of things that I wanted to consider, and I want to put some of these on the video now for the subscribers, that this may be interesting information, because we pretty much do this every year. We take a dedicated day like today and try to get some focus on the future. And one of the things we end this season on, or coming up on the end of the season, is we were really happy with this plane. This is one of the most satisfying planes I've ever had in terms of performance and the way people received it and the way it flew, and our trip down to Texas with Rich Oliver and doing prop testing on it and sharing it with Rich and all the guys. So we want to build on this, but and what happens is, I call this design evolution. But design evolution, sometimes people don't even know what it is, or if they know what it is, they don't know how to maximize the efficiency of it. Now again, I call this design evolution, and what it means is, you would start with anything, and I'm just going to use the most basic thing in the world, so it would be easy to understand. That let's start with the simplest plane in the world, probably one of the simplest and most popular planes of all time, a twister. Because I want to make an example up. If you've ever built a twister, you know several really obvious things. It's a good flying design. Almost everybody I know has built a twister, but a twister is like one of the simplest planes that you can learn about design evolution from. And everybody, probably on their second or third twister, modified it. So here we are. In its simplest form, you build your first twister, And the first thing probably everybody notices is if you put anything but a Fox 35 without a muffler on it, nose heavy. Now, the second thing you notice, if you put Vico wheels or not the most modern wheels on, the vertical CG tends to be bottom heavy. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think Ted Fancher and several other people have come up with like modified twisters and modified things that address this. So here we are. Now you're going to build your next twister. What's some of the things that, well, you know you're going to use a modern motor with a muffler. So the trick would be, if you know that ahead of time, you shorten the nose. Now in our case, because we've already built several copies of the aerodynamics that are on the Testarossa, we know we're going to, in this case, and I don't want to get into too far ahead of myself here, but I know when I know what happened with last year's plane, or the evolution, the tendency of my planes, the tendency of my planes is always that they're a little bit nose heavy. So that twister with a modern motor, shorten the nose. Now again, I'm not a school teacher or a college graduate or anything, but I know how this works. And I know it from being out at the field and building a lot of planes. Probably that might even be a better way than learning about it in college. I don't know. Another choice you would have, you could make the tail a ½ inch longer to balance the plane. But what you're looking for is to get that CG right. And then you would also know, in this case, if you had to use these big heavy wheels to fly off grass, well, one of the things you probably would want to do is on the next one, lower the wing 1/8 of an inch. Just make a new fuselage with the wing cut out 1/8 of an inch lower. That would take care of the well, you're going to make a new, probably a modified fuselage anyway. And you could always, even if you didn't want to make a new one, you could cut 1/8 of an inch off the bottom and just splice in 1/8 of an inch on the top. So, but what this is how a design evolves. This is how it evolves. Now, in the case of the Testarossa, this goes back even further. Now, all of my Cardinal designs, Tradition, Cardinal, Cardinal Evolution, 20-pointer, they all evolved. And what had happened each year that I built a copy of the plane, I moved the wing, moved the tail to adjust the vertical CG, adjust the nose moment. If you look back at the old Cardinals, they had 11-inch noses, and as the motors got heavier, the nose got shorter. As we went to tune pipes, the wing got raised up in a fuselage. So a lot of evolution went on in that design. Now you arrive at where we are now, and we're in the process of just fine-tuning things. Now in the case of the Testarossa, here's a couple of things we want to take into account. Well, the first and most obvious one is last year's plane was relatively nose heavy. I was doing everything I could to get weight off of the front. Well, now that we have the option of carbon fiber spinners, that knocks quite a bit of chunk of weight off the nose. Now normally, if I didn't have these lighter spinners, I would have shortened the nose 1/2 inch on next year's plane. Well, the carbon fiber spinner is going to allow me, hopefully, not to have that problem. Again, the problem is I don't want to make the nose so short that I can't fit the gas tank that I'm very happy with. I'm very happy with the way these carbon fiber tanks work. Rich Oliver has more choices than I do because he uses a clunk tank, but I like the way these run. I like the motor run characteristics. So for me, the carbon fiber spinner is tremendously important. For Rich Oliver, less important. Or people like Rich Jacobone, that their planes are extremely nose heavy, this really saves the day. And having carbon fiber spinners is going to even make it better. Now, I also know that that's going to determine that my nose moment arm, and that would be the back of the spinner, that I can still leave that at 10 inches. Now, there's a lot of reasons 10 inches works. 10 inches allows for about a 6.5 ounce tank, and that's fine. That's what we've been using. It also, it gives the appearance that I'm looking for. And what happens if the wing, if the nose is real short and the tail is long, it gives a different look in the corner. I like the look that the plane is rotating on the CG, not dropping the tail and then turning. But of course some people, and especially at the FAI, Remy Berenger's plane is specifically gives that look, and he's the world champion. But I have to build planes that I like, not that Remy Berenger likes, or that judges like. And again, when you look at something like this, you have to decide, when a design is evolving, who are you doing it to please? If you're pleasing judges, it's a lot easier, because you build the same plane over and over and over and over, never replicate it, never even change the paint job, and just make these little fine adjustments. And that's a very successful way of doing it. But for me, I'd be bored. I like a new plane every year. And next year's plane, whether it becomes the Enzo or whatever it evolves into, because we're still evolving it and we're still getting ideas from John Cafaro and Les. But one thing we decided to do is possibly add a little bit to the tail moment arm, a ½ inch. So the combination of the light spinner and a ½ inch more tail, that's fine tuning. That isn't going to radically change anything, except hopefully get my CG right where I want it. I want the CG right on the money with no ballast. Now, of course, and other people do this all the time, they put clay on a tail, they put clay here, they put weights here, but I like, in the best of all worlds, I'd like to have the plane with no ballast on it at all. And if I was going to ballast the tail, if that was going to be something I wanted to do, what I think I'd do is I'd take the stab and elevators off and spray some more clear on them. I don't know, it galls me, and I know every time I've added brass tail wheels and things like that, the CG changes, the vertical CG changes, and it makes you crazy. Now, I know this is the hard part. I know the vertical CG on the Testarossa is slightly off. It's slightly bottom heavy. So what we're going to do when we lay out the final plans, we're going to lower the wing about 1/8 of an inch. And we've had a corporate decision that 1/8 of an inch lower wing will satisfy that problem. Now that also solves another problem. It makes the gear shorter by 1/8 of an inch, and that's, believe it or not, that's a lot. So if we can, next year's plane should have a very accurate, and I'm hoping that I'm right. Of course, you never know until the plane is finished. But if everything else stays the same, that my vertical CG and horizontal CG without ballast should be right on the money. Now, if that happens, well, great. But if it doesn't, at least I'm fine-tuning toward it. I'm evolving toward what I hope will be a plane that needs no ballast or very little ballast, and I can capture all the good features of the Testarossa, and of which there are many. And at each year, the plane will be a little bit better than the plane the year before. Now, but what's difficult about doing this, if we were doing a nobler, this would be a lot easier. But because we're going to change a lot of other things, if we were just making another Testarossa, that'd be one thing. But we're going to be making something a little bit different. And so the thing to remember is to incorporate these changes into the next set of plans. Now the way to do this is to start with a fresh piece of paper. And what I do, and this is really, it's oversimplifying, but I would take the plans to the Testarossa. And we have a very accurate set of plans that Les has drawn. Now let me just lay those plans out here. Let's just pretend that that's it. It doesn't have to be that accurate. Now, that's the plane that we built last year. So we know the first thing is we want to take the wing, and we'll sketch the wing in 1/8 of an inch lower. By lowering the wing, we hope we're improving or slanting the deck in our favor to have the vertical CG right. Lowering the wing 1/8 of an inch. Okay, now what I'd have, of course, this is a piece of clear Mylar on top, and what I've done is trace in the new wing location. I'll probably make the tail a ½ inch longer, just for sake of balance. This will be a ½ inch out. Now I want to maintain the thrust line, the new lower line, and the line of the stab. I want these three lines, except for this lower line. This will be the same, this one will be lower, and this one will be the same. So what I wind up with, before I even start this and start sketching in the new fuselage, and this is where Les comes into play, we have a clear Mylar with pretty much a spinner, a wing, and a tail. And now what he does, or what he will do, is sketch in whatever he thinks the new body will be, the new rudder, and we'll try not to, the new bottom here, maybe he's going to change that, who knows, maybe, whatever. But we're not changing the location of the motor relative to the wing, relative to the stab. These I call force arrangements. These force and balance arrangements stay the same with each plane. And the original Cardinal, if you go back to the 89 Cardinal, 92 Cardinal tradition and you lay out all the plans and doublers, what you see are all these little minor changes. In fact, here, if you want to see, I even have, these are 16th plywood doublers of all the force arrangements. There's the 87 plane, the 92 plane. Every plane that I had going back, I saved the plywood doubler. I made an extra plywood doubler. So I'd know the force arrangement, where the motor mounts are relative to the center of the wing, and what happens after the design evolves a certain amount, what happens is the vertical and the horizontal CG comes out very, very close. And it's funny, when there was a time, this is the old shop in Union Avenue, the house that's being sold right now, I had templates for everything. And all of these designs, by the way, evolved from a pattern master. Every one you see here evolved, even the Red Baron. They all were illegal grandchildren of, even the rudder shapes I had patterns of. This is the way a good design evolves. And then when you get to something like the Brodak Cardinal, where you can simplify it and make it available to everybody, it's like, it's just as easy as pie once you know what all these arrangements are. But if you just sketch them in randomly, the odds are good that you, and this, by the way, Joe Ortiz took this picture, and for some reason it was just, we didn't even pose for it. You notice my even pants are even dirty and everything. And if I knew that, I would have put a clean shirt on. But what happened, it became the cover of a model aviation magazine. So that was pretty neat. But that's the original picture the late Joe Ortiz took. But the patterns and evolution. And we're working for next year's plane. We're already starting. It's probably a month left in the flying season. We're already thinking of how and where we want this design to evolve. Now I'm just thinking of something parallel that's going on for the whole event. I was just making a copy of a video for someone, and up pops Mikey Palco as a 10-year-old boy. Well, and he's got his first electric down at Brodak's 4 or 5 years ago. Look at Todd Lee, talk about evolution. Now, the whole thing that I'm getting at here is, this stuff doesn't happen randomly. Good designs, even Ted Fancher's design, I'm sure he's made many copies. Frank McMillan made many copies of his Quadron. Jimmy Casale had many, many copies of these designs. And even though they might have had different paint jobs, Radical, and Paul Walker, of course, the Impact, that's evolved. But using the theory of evolution each year to upgrade the design. And we even did that on the Twins. And it's funny, whenever I see that model aviation cover, I have a copy in my shop, I just keep thinking, wow. Now, believe it or not, and this is funny, Joe had submitted that picture, and the magazine never even told me that they were going to use it. So here I am, I don't really read magazines that much, but I open up the magazine, and the plastic it came in at the time was 92. I look at the and I said, geez, there's my evil twin on the cover of Model Aviation. That was pretty cool. Now even the sweeper evolved. You go back to the 3 or 4 sweepers, no, there's 3 altogether. And a 4th one that really was a Larry Scurinzi Blue Angel in disguise. But when you look at how a design evolved, the sweeper is another good example. And the biggest evolution of all that I remember was Big Jim Greenaway with his LJ, BJ design, and we made so many of these. God, I can't even remember how many I made. But they were absolutely, every one we made, Jim would say, move this, change this, thicken this up, change the way you build this. And it really, Big Jim is responsible for teaching me most of this stuff. And I was a good student. I really liked learning this because the planes used to be very competitive. And even on the Twins, I said that before, even on the Twins, each time we made the next one, we tried to adjust the CG, the vertical CG and whatever, right up to when we made the Tiger Cat. And I mean, within the limits you can do with a scale model, I think the results were pretty satisfying for me anyway. And every time I go up to that room now and I see the Tiger Cat and the B25 in a nice display mode, I keep thinking I think I still have one more twin left in me. I'm not gonna go any further than that, but because now I have all of this twin technology, I think the next one I make would really be a killer. But anyway, if you're gonna do it for trophies, you can't really fly twin engine planes. But if you're gonna do it because you love the event, twins are a great choice. And we have another guy making a copy of the A26 now, and I'm sure he will finish it, one of the Philly Flyers. That'll be real interesting helping him out along the way. Now I've also heard this, but I don't know that this is totally true, that this is Gilbert Beringer with his twin, and that was an awesome plane. One of the things that the guys in France do is they have that Sportster design that's evolved over the years, and they've made hundreds of copies of it and made changes to it and updated it and modernized it. And by the way, if you saw the last DVD, it has those little rudder flippers on the elevators. Well, maybe that's all evolving, and I'm sure it is, and I'm sure they've got their technology, they've got it working for them, or else they wouldn't be world champions right now. And it's always impossible for me to talk about designing or learning or mentoring or anything without mentioning Big Jim, because he really was the driving force for about 15 years. We worked hand in hand, and he taught me an awful lot. Maybe you should even say it's everything. I don't know, but it has served me well. And of course, Harold Price with the finishing, Big Jim with the aerodynamics. But that's the whole deal, is you got to learn from everybody you possibly can. So when we actually put the pen to paper, these are the things that don't really change. We know where the spinner is going to wind up because we know where the motor is going to wind up. We know we need 10 inches from here to here. We even know now where this tank will shim relative to the 76. We know which pipe size and shape we're going to be using, and we've made several of them that seem to work equally well. We know the wing is going to be 1/8 of an inch lower than last year, and we will be using the same carbon fiber wing. That wing has evolved for so many years, and we know we're going to want a little bit of 1/2 inch more on the tail. And now it's up to the design team of Les and John and myself and maybe somebody else that'll contribute to sketch in what will be next year's plane. And you can pretty much, once you have this on a Mylar, you can sketch fuselages all day long, and you can sketch everything else in place. But these three things, and actually in our case the pipe and the tank, once they're in place on a Mylar, then we just peel off a new clean sheet, draw another one, peel it off. But these can stay, they're not going to move. We're not going to start a plane and put the tail down here, and we're not going to put the nose out here or whatever. Those are the deal breakers. Those are the things that guaranteed it, or hopefully guaranteed it, we will have a good flying plane for next year. And that's what I call evolution. And when Elliott Scott drew the plans to the Cardinal evolution, it really did evolve. Now here's what really helps too, whoops, as the fan goes on, is keeping track of the weights of everything. So as we build next year's plane, we know we're not going to have a wing that's 3 ounces heavier or a tail that's 1 ounce too heavy. In fact, John DeTavio just built a new tail for his new plane and brought it over here. We weighed it, it was 1 ounce too heavy, and I said just throw it away and make another one. And John has got a tendency to build heavy planes, and we know he paints a lot, so I keep track in gram weights of every, and then this goes at the end of this year, this goes into the database and a new sheet comes out here. Every year this gets updated. And that's the technology that I find to be very enjoyable, is working as a team. John Cafaro and Les and Rich Oliver, all the people that seem to enjoy this same thing with a passion. I don't like building the same plane over and over and over again. I like each one to be a little different, although I like to keep similar things. I like to keep all the good things and just design away all the bad things. Now, in this case, there aren't a lot of bad things to design away, so we're just going to try to upgrade it even more. Les has been sketching away. John Cafaro's been sending these concept things. And I like working as a team. That's one of the things I just, it's a personal thing. Some people like working as a one-horse band, but I liken it to people that like to play in a band. Now, some people like to play in a Jimmy Dorsey orchestra, and some people like to sit on stage playing 7 instruments at once. I like to think of it kind of like NASCAR. If you're going to be the driver, somebody else has to be the pit crew. And if somebody else is the pit crew, somebody else has to own the shop where they build the car, and somebody else has to talk to the company and get you the free engine and whatever. But working as a team, now a lot of people don't like working as a team, but I do. And this is the result of last year's team effort. And I think it's something we're really going to be able to build on with those lighter parts. A much improved exhaust system. Rich Oliver's already working on little engine mods that'll go every time we learn something. It's like Bultaco, small production runs and constant upgrading. Anyway, those are the thoughts for the day. Now, because we're entering the part of the year where pretty much it's going to get cooler and cooler here, especially when we fly in the morning, Rich Oliver has sent me down some head gaskets, and I'm going to start by putting in at least one, because I know if we get out there early in the morning to fly, it's going to be long sleeve shirt weather really soon. And anytime you take off, a couple of tips. Never change the head gasket when the motor is hot. Always wait till it's cool. And in this case, I'm going back and forth in a star pattern, loosening the bolts slowly and then tighten them slowly, but opposite. Just a little torque, a little torque, a little torque. Now, they ultimately should wind up, if you have a torque wrench, with 14 to 16 inch-pounds. But for those of us who don't have a torque wrench, I just know by feel where that is. But what you don't want to do is just loosen one bolt while the other ones are tight, and then loosen the next one so that the head might have a tendency to warp. Always want to tighten and loosen the bolts in a star pattern. Same way you would work on an automobile head or a motorcycle. Now, if you look for an engine, it's probably got way more than the average flights on it. Clean as a whistle. Nice clean burn pattern. I don't see anything in there that would require any modification at all, or change, and the motor, of course, still running like as nice as I've ever had one run. That's a nice uniform burn pattern in there. That looks pretty good to me. But again, summer comes, I take gaskets out. Winter comes, add a gasket or two. And the gaskets are relatively thin. They don't make a radical change, but in cold weather, if you have the motor over compressed, the thing, you just go for a rocket ride. Now, I also wanted to do a little paint test. Now, because Midgley had the nose of his plane refinished with the paint Bob Brookins gave us, I thought, well, there's a couple of spots on here, and you can see where they are. Stone chips and handling chips, and we always had a problem where, and here's exactly the problem right here, is where this Bob Brookins paint ended and Brodak began. There's a line, and we could never get rid of the line. So Bob Brookins suggested something. He said, pull off the belly pan. Now, if this works, then we'll take the fuselage section out and do it. Take the belly pan, sand it with 1500 and M600, which he provided, by the way, because we really couldn't even buy it around here anymore. And I'm going to just scuff it up, and I'm going to mix up some of that paint. And I thought while I'm doing this, I'd do a little test on those spinner parts too, just to see if this is going to be one way to fuel proof. Now, we had used at some part in the season 15% nitro, and it leaves stains. 10% even leaves stains, and if you're not careful. But the problem with all of these two-part mixes that I found is if you're indiscriminate with them, they just wind up rolling up tremendous weight on a plane. So what I'm going to do is, before I paint this, and I'm going to paint it with the airbrush, get on the thinnest coat I possibly can, I'm going to weigh it on a gram scale, and I'll know exactly how many grams this amount would add. Now, if you're never going to use 10 and 15% fuel, you don't have to worry about this fuel proofing issue. But in this case, this plane takes, you know, industrial use, and so a lot of times it doesn't get wiped off until the end of the day. And when you're in the heat of Texas and the heat at Muncie, that fuel just cooks. So we were looking for something, and Bobby Brookins suggested we try this. Now, I had sprayed some up on the nose, but where it ends, it's always a problem. And I'm going to see if his technology works. If when you recoat, I'm going to resand that through and recoat the whole part. And when it ends at a line here, you'll never see it, because this buffs out just like Brodak dope. But the problem is, if you were to do the whole plane, the wing and everything, I think this adds a little bit too much weight. But again, other people have used it. Other people paid a penalty. This plane was really, I thought, relatively light. And again, I don't want to get into a thing where I've got a beautiful shiny plane, but it's 4 or 5 ounces too heavy, and then it needs 2 ounces of nose weight. So we're going to do this as a little test part. Let me get it all scuffed up. Now, the last step in this before we get ready to spray, there's a couple little touch-up spots. I need to just get a little one-haired brush and touch these little angles up. I also radiused this whole edge off, so I was hoping I can get some of that 2-part paint to roll around there if possible. Again, the problem that you can have with 2-part paint at some point in time, even Imron, which I used to use a lot of course, the problem has always been if it starts peeling up, it comes off like saran wrap. It's not really made to go over the lacquers that we use, but Rich Oliver has his little technique for doing it, and everybody seems to have a way or a little trick or something. And if you're anticipating using any of these 2-part materials, the person you really want to talk to is Bob Brookins. I mean, because he's a professional. And the last thing I'm doing before I get ready to do the spray in here, and it's cold out there, it's actually got to be a cold day. What I want to do is, this is M600 clean towels and clean gloves, getting all little corners and angles. I'm also going to sand down some of those prototype spinners and see if this is going to be an appropriate spinner finish. Again, we spent so much time with this mold. I really don't want to have, if I possibly can, any imperfections in this at all. Getting in all these little angles and these little Les Demet design things here. I want to get the edge. And we'll be ready to spray here in 10 or 15 minutes. Just let this dry, because there's nothing worse than you go and hit this with compressed air and there's some M600 or something down in these holes. Okay, I got all the parts prepped up. They're all wet sanded down here. Ready to mix the paint. Now this is a 4-to-1 mix. Now there are a lot of brands of this, a lot of variations of it too, so I would say if you had any questions, go right to the professional. And I'm not sure, but this is a 4-to-1 mix. Here's the other trick, and it's an important trick. Keep the catalyst in the refrigerator. The catalyst in the refrigerator will prolong the life. 4-to-1 mix, I'm going to airbrush it on. I cleaned out the airbrush, got it totally cleaned out, because I want to get the minimum amount on this. Now I'm going to take each piece and gram weigh it. I want to make sure I get the gram weight on every piece here, so I can see how much it added. Again, the problem with any 2-part, whatever you put on, that's the weight. It doesn't evaporate out into the air. Unlike Brodak dope that you put on an ounce and a lot of it evaporates out, it gases off. 2 parts don't really lose weight. They pretty much stay the same as what you put on there. Now another tip, and I don't know if this applies to this urethane stuff. Ooh, I got a dead fly in there. Lucky fly. Another tip, a lot of epoxies, and you never know which one unless you have the paperwork on them. A lot of epoxies, when you stir them with a wood stick, the catalyst gets absorbed into the wood. Look at this. Look at this. It just ate through the plastic. Whoa. You can't believe that. As I said it, it just ate through the plastic of the plastic cup. Wow, good thing I'm wearing rubber gloves. I guess you can't make this stuff up. So let's see, we just learned another valuable lesson. Wow. Look at this. Thanks for telling me about this, Bob Brookins. Okay, another thing Brodak dope doesn't do is eat through plastic cups. Wow. It's usually the catalyst. Let me throw this away. See, this is the learning curve we all have to go through. Wow. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put this in a double cup. I hope this doesn't eat through this too. So you can see, look at this, it's even on my pants. It looks like I wet my pants here. Maybe you got to wear a diaper when you use this stuff. I don't know. But anyway, this is serious stuff. That's the learning curve you go through when you, well, and part of the reason for having this stuff on video. Maybe that'll save somebody getting it in their eyes or on their face or something. Where did I talk to Brookins? Unbelievable. He doesn't give me the warning. Urethane eats plastic cups. How cute that we learned that. Okay, we're ready to spray. Now, it's not attack. It's actually attacking this cup too. So I guess the answer is put it in glass jars or something. And wear old pants. Now, obviously, these are painting pants, but as soon as I get done shooting this and put it up to dry, I'll get some acetone and try to clean these pants. Yeah, someday I'm going to write about all the funny little things that happen, including I had made the first Typhoon fuselage, and I was using epoxy, Epon epoxy. I stirred it with a wood stick, the way you stir West resin, and it never cured. And I called Gary down in Tech, and Gary said, "You used wood, ha 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 ha." So here, the whole part was ruined, $90 worth of carbon down the drain. All of the time and effort that went in, and then getting it out of the mold was like pulling a dead cat out of a sewer. So anyway, we now have 1 ounce on my pants and 3 ounces in the gun. We've got the parts weighed up. We want to see what this ultimately is going to add. Another trick, anytime you're doing this, be downwind. You notice how everything's blowing that way? Normally I have a Wilson mask with a charcoal cartridge, the one that's approved for use in Imran, but standing downwind for the amount that I spray is probably just as good. That's funny, I was trying to shoot footage one day with the Wilson mask, and it's, sounds like you're in a submarine or something. Anyway, this looks like it's going to be a nice finish, and I want to, of course, get a coat before the storm comes in. We're expecting tomorrow is the big, whatever the name it is. I want to call it Orestes Hernandez, but that's a Flyers name. Hurricane Orestes. Now, I'm not sure if you hear the wind chimes in the back, but boy, the storm is coming. Hurricane Orestes, whatever the hell it is. Anyway, again, I'm trying to get the edges. Yeah, there's a lot of lessons to be learned when you start using new materials, and I think I've learned them all the hard way. And we learned one today. No thanks to Bob Brookins. Don't put the urethane in plastic cups, or guess what? It melts. Now, this is taking a little bit of a beating up where the glow plug is. That takes a big beating too. Boy, we have had the craziest weather here. Unbelievable. I think you can see just about how quick that glosses right up. By the way, this is a convenient way to paint all the spinner tips at once. Looks like the finish that we have on here is going to be real nice, and it's just started really storming out there, and I'm glad I got this done. This looks like it's going to be fine. I learned another lesson. What happens with this material, it builds up on the tip of the airbrush and then goes toot and spits. And I got most of it off, but again, remember, this will get buffed out anyway. But it's really got a nice shine right now. So between that and between the spinners, we've learned something about this material. Now, the other thing that's real important about using these two-part materials, soon as you're done, at the minute you're done, clean the gun or the airbrush with acetone. In fact, I clean it 2 or 3 times until it's just spraying out perfectly clear, and then clean it one more time. Or you wind up, if that material, about 2 hours after starting it, it turns gummy and glums up your airbrush. Now, another thing we learned, and this is going back to the days of Imran, I don't know if it's true with this material, but we could do a little test, of course. With Imran, we found out that if you take, normally the mix is 3 to 1, and for our purposes, if we mixed it 2 to 1, it flowed out a whole lot better. Didn't pick up as much dust because it cured a lot quicker, but you probably lost something in the balance. But remember old tradition, and how ironic is this? Tradition is right up here. That was painted in '86, and when Midgley took the finish off last year, it was still in pretty nice shape. So anyway, we're learning about paint. Every day that goes by we try to learn something, but most of all we try to pass it on one way or the other. And today we learned, look at these pants. The pants are ruined. Karen's going to die. She's going to say, drinking too much coffee. But that's how you learn in the real world. Old school learning. I just wanted to show this. This was about 10 minutes after shooting the last video, and good thing I had put the cup in the paper. The urethane melted the bottom. I'm going to have to remember, it looks like it's okay in paper, but well, I don't know. But boy, that's a lesson to be learned. Now, if you were sitting around and this fell on the floor, which I don't know if some fell on the, yeah, I don't think any fell on the floor before, but that was a pretty interesting minute of my life. Anyway, there's your lesson of the day. Don't use plastic cups when you're using urethane. One of many good lessons we've learned today. Well, life is certainly full of a lot of valuable lessons, right, Chickie? You bet, Wendy. So Karen came home. The clothes, look at the water in here. Holy mackerel. You know what I did? I poured acetone and then Brodak thinner and then Brodak retarder on the pants. I didn't realize that was already almost cured, so I don't think that's going to come out. But Karen had a good suggestion. See, she has all these things for getting stains out, for carpet and all this stuff. None of it worked. None of it. But she did make a suggestion. She says, Wendy, you forget everything, so put a sign on the thing, because probably by next week you'll forget what the heck happened, and you'll go and do it again. And you know what? The truth is, she's right. So that probably is the best idea of the day. Anyway, that was truly funny. I got to admit it. Now this morning, as we knew was happening, this is Hurricane Ernesto that's coming up here, not Orlando Hernandez or whatever I said the other day. It's Ernesto, and it's pouring rain and trees are blowing down and the wind is blowing. And I'm glad I got that painting done yesterday. Otherwise, well, go see how that paint dried up. Okay, so here's the bottom line. We let this sit overnight. Let me name out, which obviously there's a million people in the world that would like to just leave it at that, but I like to buff it out. Now, but that wasn't the problem, because I know this stuff does buff out very nice. I was really concerned about the weight. Now that part obviously has plenty of shine and gloss and whatever on there, but when I put it on a scale, this part had gained 5.5 grams. So that's a severe penalty. Now some of that is going to come off. Some of it's going to come off when I'm going to 1500 sand it and buff it. The spinners gained about 0.5 gram, so that's that's not going to be a deal breaker, that's for sure. But I was a little disappointed that this gained so much weight. So what I'm going to do, and Bob Brookins had suggested this, is wet sand it all with 1500, and then just buff it out with Gorham's the same way you and finesse it and whatever the polishing compound's going to use. And if we get done with that, I'll make up another spinner. But right now I wanted to work with this paint, because we're going to hopefully be using this paint, I was hoping. In fact, on the spinners I know it's going to be fine. The simple reason that half a gram is not going to mean anything on a spinner. And we got some of these now. These are the original ones that Elliot sent. So you wish you could make this paint lighter, but again, I'm going to find out. One of the things Bob Brookins told me was there's a reducer for the paint, and I had put this on with an airbrush. This is a super light coat. So I can see where guys that take a spray gun and put this on can really pile on an inordinate amount of weight. But again, it'd be nice if it's on the spots. Here's the thing, it would be nice if it's on the nose of the plane, or in this case the bottom. Well, that's where the fuel stains usually wind up. But you sure don't need it on the wing. If you did a wing with this, I bet it would add 3 or 4 ounces. Again, we'll find out on somebody else's plane. Now, one of the things I thought of, I never did this yet, but one of the things I could do is take a flight with the belly pan off. Of course, with the belly pan off, of course, then the vertical CG is the other way around. But Miss Ashley, I had done that several times just to see how the plane would fly. It's basically 3 ounces less, and a lot of times it's dramatic change in the vertical CG or the 4.5 CG. So I want to take one of the spinners, it wouldn't matter which one, just take some 1500 paper and some Gorham's and see how it buffs out. Again, the paint is already a day old. Now Rich Oliver has told me the paint that he uses, which is a similar brand, maybe it's the same brand, I don't know, you can pretty much buff the plane out the next day. And what happened yesterday, this paint dried in about 2 hours. It was dry to the touch, but the problem is you could still put your fingerprint in it. So I'm guessing it would be a smart thing to wait a day or so. Well, we'll try one today and see if it's today or tomorrow that we can buff these out with. It'll be an interesting little test when we come to do it. First thing is just like Brodak dope, get it down to where it's flat. Now usually with dope, any kind of dope, especially Brodak dope, a couple of days and you can buff it out, but it really helps if you wait a while. I don't know about this material, but what I'll do is I'll save one of the spinners for, well, let it sit for a week and see if it buffs out quicker than the one we're going to try out. And just finish this up with some microfibers. Now what I wanted to do too, where is that jar? This is one of the products Bob Brookins recommended to do the final buffing after using Gorham's, or maybe in replacement of Gorham's. I'm going to have to try a couple different compounds, but Gorham's always works. Now the other neat thing about Gorham's is about, in the case of Finesse It, about 1/10 the price. Which, for some reason, in the world of control line, it's always a big selling feature when stuff is really, really cheap. And in the worst of all worlds, you can use toothpaste. I think toothpaste is more than Gorham's, though. Anyway, let's see what this starts to look like. Oh, yeah. Now, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute. Let's get one that isn't buffed. You may be thinking, well, why? There isn't much of a difference. And you know what? There is a difference, because here's the difference. This feels nice. I don't know what there is about this, but you can feel it. The shine doesn't change much, but you can see little... See, the problem with any two-part mix, it picks up dust. If you could have like an auto body, a dust-free room, you wouldn't have to deal with, you almost wouldn't have to buff it out, but what we're really doing is getting rid of the dust in this. But anyway, that is... Oh, that feels nice. That feels like a buffed out dope finish. But the problem, again, be really careful. Don't just go painting the whole plane with this stuff. Boy, oh boy. You You can turn a plane into decoupage real quick with this material. So what you're really doing here is trading away some weight for a little more fuel proofness, but there's a real, and I mean it, and boy, I could name you a list of people, including myself, that have fallen for this trick of saying, wow, I'll just paint the whole plane with this, and when you're all done you wind up with an 80-ounce plane that you've traded away all the good characteristics of the plane. So if you use it discriminately, I think it's good. And I think in spot places, a cowling, nose of the plane, spinner, things that'll get fuel stained, but I sure would never consider, unless you're really, really careful, and I don't, maybe with that reducer, I'll have to talk and put the information on a future tape. If you do that, reduce this even further. But it does buff out very nice the next day. And again, what I found as being a good way to buff it out, I like to buff it out to where it's got this gets rid of the dust, and then just finish it off with a little bit of this material. This material is about 40 bucks a jar. This is 5, so I don't. But of course, you know, this is a professional material, and you can buy this in any body shop supply. You can usually buy this if you can find it. It hasn't been made in years, but they still have some, or I still have a supply of it. Good idea. So we learned something about this. What I'm going to do is off camera buff the rest of these parts out. Now, when you buff out a dope finish too, usually on a whole plane, I can get about 1.5 ounces off the plane. In other words, when I weigh the parts, and now dope gets lighter and lighter as that first month goes by. It outgasses. At the end, when it's buffed and outgassed, it's about 1.5 ounces lighter than when it originally was sprayed, and 2 or 3 days later when the most of the outgassing goes off. What happens is, so if you have a 63-ounce plane and you buff it, it's going to be a 61.5-ounce plane. But I don't know about this material. And I know I've added 5.5 grams to the belly pan. I want to see how much of that I can buff off realistically. But I don't think, maybe 1 gram or 2, I don't know. And again, I think one of the next steps for us is going to be to see if you can use the reducer, and also put this material on with maybe a little bit less pressure, because it's thick. See, what happens, it's thick. You can't put this on with 10 pounds of pressure. You've got to use 40 or 50 pounds in my airbrush anyway. And what happens is that puts a lot of material on. So the thing would be to put just the slightest wet coat on there. That would be the right way to do it. But we'd need to reduce the material, get rid of the viscosity, and maybe even do it on a really, really hot day. Wait for an 80-degree day where the material would just flow right out. We did it on a pretty cold day yesterday. So we're going to do some more testing. This is something, and we're certainly never going to put it in a... Karen had a laugh. She almost fell on the floor when she saw that cup. That's how you learn in the school, the windy school of hard knocks. Now, another thing that's an advantage here is if you've ever painted aluminum spinners, you know it's really hard to get the paint to stick. I think you have a little bit better chance with the carbon fiber, but in time we're going to find out. Now the next challenge is going to be, after wet sanding this and doing all the compound and finesse it, to see how much of that weight we can actually get off. And I'm hoping, in this case it's really a small amount, but I'm hoping I can just get a proportion. In other words, if we put 5.5 grams on and I can get 1 gram off, I'll know, that's about 20% of the weight, something like that. So I'll know if I put any part, I can take the addition, the weight of the paint, and then pull 20% off with buffing. Well, and that's probably pretty close to what it is on a dope finish. But one thing we found out, the gram scale doesn't lie, and if you keep notes, then you find out. See, the thing about doing all this stuff yourself is you don't depend on other people. In my case, I'd call people up, I'd say, how much weight did that paint add to your plane? Oh, nothing, it only weighs 1 ounce. Then you go to weigh their plane. Oh no, you better not weigh it for me. No, 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 no. Well, you got to make the gram scale your friend, and if the gram scale says it's 2 ounces or 1 ounce or 1 gram or whatever, it is. The gram scale doesn't lie. Now I also found this part had picked up a lot of dust. You can see I've got to really flatten out. See, and it's not as shiny as I thought it would be. But once you block it down, that's the key to getting that shine that you really feel, and it really looks nice. Now, unfortunately, or however you want to look at this, I was only able to get 1 gram off of this. So that really is within the range, I guess, that we wanted. We started out with 5.5, we're down to 4.5. But anyway, we do have it. This is about as fuel-proofed as I can possibly make it. It'll add some longevity to the plane, and I hope we're going to be flying this plane for several years. See, what happens is you start with a plane you fly in competition, Brodaks and the Nats or whatever. Then it becomes a team trials plane where there's no appearance points. Then it becomes a motor test plane, and then it becomes you know, and depending on how long it lasts, usually Midgley winds up with them. But anyway, that shine, and I think that's doable for anybody. And I wish we had some better weather. I wanted to test that 91. I wanted to run it. I'm dying to get my Strega ARF so I can run that 91. And boy, once you have this in your hand and you just, I've put a prop on it and flipped it and just been mesmerized. I want to get this in something. Now the unfortunate part, several people have said, I have a test plane, I'll loan it to you. Several of them have turned out to be unacceptable because they have little 3/8 mounts. I wouldn't even think about putting this in a 3/8 mount plane. But they've already had it in a Bearcat. Just for reference, I just want to reference this to you. Give you an idea. There's a 60. 61. Now, every time I do that, I just think, see, to make a plane that's interchangeable, here's the problem. You've got to allow for, let's line up one side. Wow, that almost 1/4 inch of mounts. Now, not every plane, you'd have to at least start with a plane that had 1/2 inch mounts and then hopefully get enough, even that, I don't know if you put pads or something in there, I don't know. But one thing, if we start with a brand new Strega ARF, and they should be here very soon, we're going to be making a dedicated video, among other things, putting it together, flying it, trimming it, and then at some point in time, that'll become our test plane. It's an exciting thing to have that just sitting in the shop here. It's like it talks to you. It says, come on, put me in something, I need to fly. It really does talk. Anyway, that's coming. What I wanted to do today, this is our first pull out of the mold, so we never can tell if we're going to have to make some changes. And that released nice and clean, no problem. Now it's always the first couple of pulls out of a mold where the mold is green that they tend not to want to come out the way you expect it. And I want to take this and just very carefully work around the edge. And then I'll pull the bottom off the mold, since this is just a prototype part. Oop. You can actually see it releasing around the side as air goes in there. Another really neat way to make a mold like this is somewhere down at the bottom is put a fitting for an air hose and just pump air in. That does pretty much the same thing. Now that's still in there, so we'll have to take the bottom off. Once we get the bottom off, then we can put some pressure on the bottom of this. And once we make several of these, what happens is the mold will be releasing easier and easier. And what I'll do today, because I only have a little bit of time, the storm is over and we have yard work to clean up today, so but I thought what I'd do is try to get one of these laid up maybe with that carbon, half carbon and half e-glass material, just to see how that would work. Okay, now we can maybe just tap on this. There you go. And it looks like we have a usable part. Well, there's some spots where it's not perfect there, but is that on a joint? I don't know. But we did get a nice crisp lip here, which is important. Now I'm trying to evaluate if that's going to be enough material or if we need to make it 2 layers. Well, what I'm going to do is try with the carbon material. It's half carbon and half e-glass. I'll do that up off camera. Now, because this is a new mold, I'm going to do the whole prep over again. Wax, polish, 4 times. You really don't even have to do that, but I want to preserve the surface of this mold. I don't want this to get all chewed up in time. And then I'll start laying up a bunch of these. Obviously they have to be trimmed. I have to cut the hole for the nose cone and decide what material to use. Now for a prototype, this looks like it'll be fine. But I'm hoping eventually I'll be able to make them out of various materials, make them various weights and thicknesses. Now the ones that are already done, these weigh 5 and 6 grams when they're painted, and almost 1 gram of it is the paint. So when that becomes that, I'll do that part of it off camera. It's too nice of a day. I just want to get this done, and I got to go clean out the yard. But there's our first part. I'm sure as we start making these up, we're going to find better and better ways, different materials. But for right now, we've got a functional part out of the mold. I got a new friend having breakfast with me this morning. I guess he's bored having breakfast with me. Anyway, the storm is finally over. We've cleaned up the whole backyard. We had a lot of branches come down. And it looks like right after one of these Ernesto things. Look how nice the sky is. We may even have a good flying day. Boys, am I going to have a good flying day today or what? Come on. My baby, this is the baby that's going inside later this year. Get one baby. Now what could be better than after a hurricane goes through your area? Get out at the flying field. Hey, Hurricane Detavio, you got any trees down by your house? You should see all the trees down in Rutherford, baby. What a mess. I'll tell you, when you don't get to fly for 10 days in a row, boy, it feels good to get back out to the field.
15 hours.
My neighbor's got trees all. Mikey could make $1,000 today with a chainsaw.
Saturday night in the rain.
Ah.
I have a small generator I wanted to use as a fire my sump pump.
Right.
My sister-in-law was basement was flooding. I couldn't get my generator started. It took me like an hour out in the pouring rain because there was no lights. You had to be, couldn't be in the garage.
Yeah.
I got that going. Plug in her sump pump and it shorted out. They had replaced the switch or something. My brother-in-law went out and bought a $600 generator and a new pump to keep his house going. I had mine going, and my neighbor, an older elderly woman next door, her son came and they got the generator running 6 years.
Yeah. What a nightmare this last week has been.
Flashlight.
You guys didn't fly all week, did you? So forget it. Yeah, the pusher engines, they go into Teterboro now.
Yeah, my father hears that thing all the time. He tells me.
You can hear it. Boy, that's higher at 6-bladed props. That goes over the house, you can really hear it. Now we had a good day to put Doran's 3-blade prop to the test even more. And we're really happy the way this is working out now. Finally we're getting to where I'm comfortable in all conditions with this prop. This setup has really come along in the last, I don't know, last month or so since the Nats. Anyway, we have got a lot of damage. In fact, if you look right up here, there's trees down up here. Not big ones, but they're all over the place. And on the way down here, today's the Rutherford Street day, on the way down here, boy, there was some tree branches everywhere. This is some of the damage from our latest storm right outside the flying field too. The thunderbolt. Well, this morning, as we always do, we watched the commuters get on the commuter train for New York City at the Rutherford station, and we head out to the flying field for some prop testing. Now, as I look at my Corvettes here all lined up on the way to the field, just wanted to mention, had spoken to Rich Oliver yesterday for actually almost 2 hours. He just won the Dallas contest with a Doran 3-bladed prop. He's having exactly the same experience with these props that I am, and trying to make a turnkey package for the people that are using this package. Both the motor, the pipe. The prop is an integral part of the setup. Look at somebody stealing my Corvette already. Anyway, anytime I pass this Chevy dealer on the way to the field, I start thinking about next year's plane. But you can see it's a cloudy day, which we're hoping to get some flights in and some prop testing before the rain comes. Now, the other thing, I've been using my little battery charger every day, either on the way to the field or the way back, keep the battery topped off. Very handy little tool. What are you doing? Well, it looks like we have a great day for prop testing, and we've got plenty of toys to play with today. It looks like it's going to be a good day. But one of the things, when this day is over, I want to get some more parts molded up out of that spinner mold. I'm getting excited about seeing how those are going to work out. But it's uncanny that Rich Oliver and I experiences that once you get these props pitched up just into the right range for the 77, boy, they are a really nice match. That is a real nice power match. And as I understand it from Doran, he's already working on making an additional prop mold, but I don't know the specs on it yet, but we're looking forward to testing those as soon as we get them. But this is how we start out every day, with a square one flight, and then work our way down in. At this point in time, we're just testing the Doran 3-blades. And again, congratulations to Rich on winning that Dallas contest. Well, we got 2 of the props that we had repitched tested, and that's about all we're going to get done today because it's already starting to rain, and they're predicting, of all things, another couple of days of rain, just what we need. Anyway, let's get back to the shop. Now, the next one we pulled out of the mold had some carbon, and I didn't like the way this laid up. In fact, by putting a rubber plug in, I think it's pulling this aside. I don't think this is a really accurate fit up in the front here, and I'm not sure. What I'm going to do is try. I'm not sure what the cure for that's going to be, but what I wanted to try, I took some of the sock, the material that we use for making tuned pipes, and I thought, well, that'll be worth giving a try to. Make some little pieces inside. I got the PVA. Oh, the PVA is dry already. And since we're going to have a couple of days of rain, we'll get a couple more of these laid up. But the goal is to try 4 or 5 different material choices and resin choices, and then settle on which one we're going to use for the final product. And of course we need to keep track of the weights of this. Some of the materials that we've been using are making a part that's a couple grams heavier. I'd like it to be lighter if anything. So we're just going to have to keep experimenting with this until we come up with what we're going to use on the production parts. Now, one of the nice things that Reuben McBride always, one of the people I really enjoy helping with any of his modeling projects, and he's always willing to pay back. Now, John Pothier had taken one of many top 5 photos, and Reuben McBride had this printed at his, and I'm not sure the name of the printer, there isn't a label on here, but as usual, Reuben came through in a pinch. Now this is funny, and this is not even possible to make this up. What really happened is several people had sent me the top 5 photos. Dale Berry, Bob Lampione, and the problem with every one of them is, see, this is the first time Brett won the Nat. So Brett had this awful thing. In 9/10 of the pictures, he had stuck the tail right up in front of the Testarossa, and let you know, for the next year or so, or well, whenever, then maybe the rest of my life, I don't want to be looking at Brett's tail. I want to be looking at the Testarossa. So John Pothier took the photo and took me out of the photo and moved me over a little bit. See, see how everybody's together here? Well, you know, the poor guy in the middle here, and Orestes, this is the first time he was in the top 5, so he doesn't have the idea yet that you got to hold the plane up with a. See what happened to poor Orestes' plane? And poor Derek, it's like he doesn't even exist. He only has a tail and a wingtip and a hat. But John did a real nice job, and what we tried to do is he took a little bit of effort, made Ted look a little older than he is, made Brett look a little chubbier, yellowed out his teeth, you know, just kidding here. But anyway, and I told him, now because John is an expert at this, John Pothier, I said, you know, you got to make me look a lot younger and handsomer than I am, and I'm not sure he did that, but anyway, that's the story of this year's top 5 photo, this year's top 5 plane, 17 or 18 or how many there are. I have to go, one of these days I have to go figure that out. But now the only thing left is Karen usually picks where she wants the pictures, and what the problem is, some of our pictures here, like this one, you know, that's the 87 picture, and sometimes they don't even fit in places, and you got to move things around. And I love this. Anybody knows me knows I love pictures on the wall. I hate to come to a shop and see walls. I want to see pictures. I want to see things that make me want to build another plane. Anyway, this morning riding by those Corvettes, I had another inspiration, another idea for something I want to incorporate on the plane. In a week or 2 from now, we're going to be starting at least the sketches, the rough concept sketches. And Rich Jacobone just called me. He got the resin to glasses wing, so we're going to be starting that project too. But anyway, special thanks to John Pothier, John Cafaro, Reuben McBride, all the people that sent me pictures, all the people that contributed. And we'll make this a permanent part of our shop, and it's another one in the record books. And I would have never ever guessed when we started the Testarossa, because it's such a departure from the traditional, and I thought it'd be at best, you know, be competitive, but it turned out to be real competitive. And I'm not so sure, you know, that we've seen the end of the Testarossa at the Nats, because next year's plane now, if it turns out it's going to be a very, very complex project, we can make it a 2-year project. We have a good plane, and I'd be willing to bet right now it'd go right back into the front row. You wouldn't lose 1 appearance point. Anyway, we'll see how that all works out when we start the Enzo. In today's mail, this is a picture from Ken Clapson of his Stuntress. He basically has been flying his Stuntress all summer, loving every minute of it. It says a Jet 50 and a Bill Lee 3-blade prop. And of course the paint job is reminiscent somewhat of the Voodoo, the Reno Air Racer. Now, I've flown Joe Adamusco's original Stuntress, quite a good flying plane. And Jet 50 was always one of my favorite engines. And Ken, the only thing would be better here is if all the Canada geese would fly up to Canada. We got inundated at the field today with, after we had rolled up the lines and everything, we were just standing around. We had a flock of geese fly over the field. There had to be 200 or 300 of them. And luckily nobody was flying. And they need to go up to Canada, to Ken Clapson's house. And I spent a lot of the time cleaning up some of my top 5 posters. Some of these had been behind the televisions and VCRs and stuff and covered with dirt. You couldn't even see how old we were. But it's always nice to get them out of limbo. Always nice to add a new one to it also. But boy, look at some of us. How old, how young, how handsome. Well, old anyway. And it's really nice having these around the shop. Boy, talk about memories. Lubbock, Texas. Ooh, hurts just thinking about it. And some like Reno that we'll never forget at all. Old Lake Charles. Yeah, old Lou Dudka there. Look at Dudka. Old Strega. And who could ever forget the Typhoon? Now we're back. We're back. You would think we never get tired of this prop testing stuff, but, well, we don't. And again, another call to Rich Oliver, another confirmation. He is doing Doran props, Doran 3 blades. For anybody that's got a 77, that's one of the props you really want to have in your arsenal. It needs, at least in my case, needed to be up pitched just a little bit. A minor adjustment for sure, but boy, that's turned out to be, on this airplane, turned out to be a real good combination. And what's happening on the 65, like on John DeTavio's 65, these props need to be cut down to about 13.5 to really be efficient. They run about 10,000, 10.1, 10.2. On the 77, they run 92, 93. I've had them up even a 95. But of course, according to the pitch. But boy, once you get it dialed in, boy, is that sweet. Now, for anybody that hasn't, and I know several people that are running 77s, done this for John Cafaro among other people. If you send me your prop, I'll be glad to put it on my plane, fly it a few times, pitch it, do all the rework on it, send it back to you for one low price, a pizza. Anyway, we're learning a lot. Rich has got one on his plane. He's going back and forth with he's got a Bali, an Ether, and a Doran, and I'm not sure which one he's going to settle in on, but he's working with props now. Brian's getting to be the local expert here also. And all I can suggest is if you haven't tried one of these props, or if you've tried it and it doesn't have the right pitch, again, just send it to me and we'll try to help you out.